other people that I know or that I work with where it's like success is I have to finish the script, I have to shoot this short film, I have to direct my first movie.
How did you define success 20 years ago?
Well, I have a confession on that front. 20 years ago, like success to me was about how am I making someone else happy. I'm a recovering people pleaser and a perfectionist, and so success for me was, oh, is my boss happy? And so that would manifest in terms of like, I'm going to be the first one to read the script. I'm going to be the first one to have written out my notes. I'm going to be the first one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because I was really conscious of some of the deficits that I had in my experience, because I was like a late bloomer. I didn't move to Hollywood until I was 26 years old, and all of my friends and people that I went to school with had gone to LA right after college. And so I'm like, oh my God, I'm 4 years behind. And so I always felt like, okay, the way that I'm going to try to get ahead is by being first. So maybe that's how I define success, but it's mostly about how is someone responding to me.
What does success mean now?
Oh, I love this question. Success for me right now is really, and this is going to maybe sound a little bit hokey, but like, am I being authentic to myself? Because I'm a recovering perfectionist and people pleaser, I really have to check in with myself to say, okay, is this something that I truly want? Do I truly need? And so like, that's the first layer. And then I guess the next layer of success for me is, I am goal-oriented, and so like on a daily or a weekly or a monthly basis, I have like my list of like, am I checking off these boxes? Because in the big picture, on that outer layer is, and I don't have necessarily a lot of control over this, is that I want to have a positive impact on people's lives. I want to be able to help people really enjoy the processes that they're engaged with professionally, and especially within the entertainment industry, where I feel like the processes of creating content and developing content, they're sort of broken. And I find it so ironic that an industry that's built on creativity it condemns people for when there's failure. But great creative doesn't come unless there's failure. And so I really like, if I had a big dream and like to define success, it would be to say, okay, let's embrace creative failure so that we can continue to be able to like find stories and really be able to reflect what's really happening in the world. Does that make sense?
It does. I think, part of your backstory, and maybe it'll come out more in the interview, you've talked about, different points in your life when things weren't going well. And I think it sounds like you really embrace being okay with that and then trying to rise up.
Yes, there's just so much judgment, and I'm a big believer in assessment. I think it's so important to be able to assess like what went right so that we can continue to use it as a foundation, and then also assess like what hasn't gone right, why did this fail, but to remove judgment out of it. So take the good and the bad out of the conversation and really like look at, okay, what are like the mechanics of something, or what's like my mental processes that may be stopping or slowing me from being able to take a swing and try something that's really exciting and new and different.
And it sounds like too, doesn't matter the gender, people experience failure in equal ways, maybe in different compartments.
Yeah, I mean, failure is it's a natural part of who we are. It's like from thinking about like in your childhood, I don't even know if you remember this. I don't remember learning how to walk, but it's like toddlers, like they're called toddlers because they're toddling along, and then they're constantly like trying to take a step, and then they fall and they get back up again. And then somewhere along the way, we've been taught that that's not okay, that it's not okay to fail or to have a mistake or to need to hold on to something in order to take a couple of steps. And so, yeah. I don't know where I started to go with that, but just thinking about failure in that regard or mistakes in that regard, and that it's like so important to be able to say it's okay and to be able to assess as opposed to judge.
Well, we were going to talk about this a little later, but I know you've said something in other interviews about what you call the faceplant moment. which I think is like a brilliant analogy. And we've all had them. I guess it's how graceful we get back up. I mean, it's kind of like if you trip if you're going to a conference and you trip in front of a room of people, everyone's watching. How do you handle it?
Yeah, absolutely. As you were talking, I was just thinking about when I was an assistant at Triad, which was an agency back in the early 90s. It was my first job in Hollywood. And there was this amazing woman. She was the head of business affairs. And she really took me and a couple of other assistants under her wing. And we could ask her just like the stupid questions of like, what does net mean? What does gross mean? What are points? What is packaging? All of that stuff. And I remember she was running down the hallway, and she always dressed so smartly, always like a really great blouse and a skirt and a jacket. And she was running down the hallway. There was some phone call that was really urgent, and she literally face planted. And I remember like witnessing it going, oh my God. And then she got up, and I can still see this in my head, and she started to cry because it was just so embarrassing to have this literal face plant in front of all of these people. And then I was like, oh my God, she's now crying in front of all these people. And I just thought it was so vulnerable, and my admiration for her just skyrocketed. And and she's a woman as well, so she's being judged differently than anybody else. And so I think you're actually helping me realize something in this moment as I'm talking about it, is that I think that really planted a seed for me in terms of really looking at face plants in a particular way. Because it didn't affect her talent and her ability, her expertise, and how effective she was. It was just a face plant. She just tripped.
Wow. That could be written into a script right there, because it really could set the tone for like the opening of a show or something.
Yeah.
And then you show that this person's actually a powerhouse, but you see how vulnerable they were in that moment. Wow, I felt like I was right there when you were telling the story.
Yeah.
Wow. So maybe that's where, that came from, because I've heard you say it, and I was like, yeah, that's a good analogy, like faceplant. We've hopefully it's not every day we have them, but we've all had them. Do we all have different definitions of success?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think about I'm just laughing because for me, is like success is like how many boxes of like on my daily to-do list can I check off? And then I'm thinking about other people that I know or that I work with where it's like success is I have to finish the script, I have to shoot the short film, I have to direct my first movie. And then there are other people outside of the entertainment industry where it's like success is, I was listening to a podcast where success is walking to the mailbox because this person has a chronic illness and that's just the best they can do. But that's a huge thing. And so, yeah, success is very different for all of us, isn't it?
I mean, there's public failure that we see, but there's probably also so much private failure that we would have no idea. Relationships suffering, or, people being sabotaged.
Yeah.
Different things.
Yeah. I also have to think about success from the lens of working in a capitalistic society. I mean, we're from the West, and so our values are so different than other parts of the world. And I think that for a lot of people, or at least people that I encounter or that I've grown up with, that success is frequently defined on the professional realm. And then people talk about, oh, success is, have I raised happy, healthy kids? Am I a good spouse, or am I a good partner? But then and I don't mean this to sound judgmental, it's really an observation, but then when I look at how they spend their time and the things that they're devoting their lives to and their energies and even financial investments, it's on the professional realm. So while it's not necessarily one-to-one of like where you put your time is where, you're looking to achieve or attain success, I do think there's some type of correlation. And so I think the cost of success is I think there's always a cost, but obviously it depends on the individual and the circumstances. Like when I think about the success that I've had in my career, it's really come from, like the cost of it is spending time with my kids and with my husband, which has really severely been compromised. And of course, they're important to me and they're a priority, but there's so many times, and I even said to my daughter this morning, it's like, I need to go work for a couple of hours. And it's a Saturday morning, and I'm not spending time with her because I'm invested in the success of my career.
Well, I think I was listening to a panel or an interview with, is it Sophia Amoroso from Girl Boss? Yeah. Fascinating story. And I realized you were an executive producer on the Netflix show. And she basically said that it just got to a point where it was like she was on these panels and, oh, she had made the Forbes or the 30 under 30 or whatever it was. And it was just so dizzying that she started to ask herself, do I even like fashion? Like, what is all this? Like, it happened so fast for her.
Yeah, and our values and our priorities change because new experiences occur, data comes in, we grow up, we grow in different ways. And so sometimes I think that there's a social construct that our lives have to be static. It's like, okay, you want to be a writer, you want to be a director, you want to be an actress, and then you just have to pick a lane, a single lane, and stay in that. And I personally like really rebel against that. It's like, I love being a producer, I love being a coach, I love being a professor, and I frequently hear people like, but what are you? And so when I get asked that question, I have to go back to my purpose. It's like my life purpose is helping people across their finish line. And I get to do that in all of these different ways. And I also get to do it as a parent, I get to do it as a spouse, I get to do it as a friend. And so I understand like Sophia's, perspective in terms of, yeah, there came a point in her life where this lane that she had chosen, it just no longer was fulfilling or it didn't resonate with her values anymore. But so frequently we're not given permission to change our mind and we're judged for that.